this room participated in that effort. You were a tremendous help, and he said that your input was invaluable. This man is such a warrior in our state that he has been featured in The Hayride, The Epic Times, and on Fox News twice. And that was just last week. We could not be more blessed to have with us today, and I could not be happier than I am to introduce to you Dr. Kay Brumley.
Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be among you all. So much wisdom in the room, and I too want to acknowledge those individuals, not just Representative Hodges, but the individuals in the audience and at the dais who are at the legislature every single day fighting for the principles in which you believe. And I'm not going to start calling out names because I'll leave someone out, and I don't want to do that, but you know who you are, you know what you're there doing, and you represent your group very well. So I'll try to be brief. I think that I'll just start, and I seldom prepare remarks, and I haven't prepared them today, but as I was thinking about what I might say just a couple of minutes ago, I thought about, you know, we have in American education and in Louisiana education, we have forgotten some things and we have overcomplicated some things. For instance, we have overcomplicated the skill of reading. Our kids overwhelmingly aren't reading on grade level by the time they leave third grade. So what do we need to do? We need to go back to the basics and teach kids phonics and how to break down words and just simple things. But that's an example of how we've tried to overcomplicate things. We have tried to overcomplicate parent-school relationships. And we have often created barriers on both sides of that wall to having seamless relationships where parents and schools and individuals in those schools communicate with each other fruitfully every single day, understanding that they both love that child very much, but the child belongs to the parent, and the parent knows exactly what is in the best interest of their child. And I think we've overcomplicated that. I think that we have forgotten many of the reasons why our high schools exist. You know, our high schools exist certainly to produce citizens who are ready to go out into the world, but we also exist so that we can produce individuals ready to go into college or ready to go to the workforce. And specifically, whenever we think about high-paying jobs in career and technical education or vocational crafts, those have been diminished for way too long. And we need to elevate those because those are good, high-paid, high-wage jobs that people can have in our communities. They can contribute to society, pay taxes, be good members of our community, but we've forgotten about that for several decades. I think that we have forgotten about the value of our teachers and the fact that we have to elevate the teaching profession. Are our teachers perfect? No. Do I think overwhelmingly the majority of our teachers in our classrooms across the state of Louisiana every day are giving their all to not only take care of kids, but try to give them the education that they need and deserve? Yes. I think the answer to that is yes. And we need to elevate and be thankful for the teachers that are doing that hard work, often in unwinnable situations every single day. So we can't forget about that. And then finally, the last thing I thought about, and this is, you know, in relation to our most recent work, is in our schools we've often forgotten or have chosen to forget that America is an exceptional country. And we shouldn't apologize for that, and we should make sure that our kids understand that. They should appreciate the value of the country. They should appreciate their obligation to sustain our republic, to defend it, protect it, to improve it, all while recognizing that we have had times in our country that have not been perfect. But the beauty of our republic is that we have the ability to self-correct. Dictators do not self-correct. Monarchs don't self-correct. We have self-corrected in a constitutional republic in a quest to become a more perfect union, and we should not forget that, and we need to make sure our kids understand that. So those are some of the things I think that we have either overcomplicated or forgotten in our school system over the course of time. So I'll tell you a few of the areas where we are focused as an agency, some of our highest priority areas. The first is early care and education. So making sure that if children need a seat, if parents need a place for their child to be, that we can make sure that when a kid is birthed to 4 and a parent needs a place for their child to be, that we have a high quality option not just in this city, but across the state to serve our kids and our parents. Next, literacy. I mentioned earlier that too few of our kids are learning to read by the end of third grade, and then we know that if you're not reading on grade level by the end of third grade, you're 3 or 4 times more likely to get a high school dropout. We know that 80% of people sitting in prisons today do not have a high school degree. So we've got to go back to the basics. We've got to train our teachers. We've got to work with our colleges to make sure that they're training their future teachers appropriately, because we have to make sure our children can read, and too few of them have done that. And I'll tell you, when I went to the Department of Education, there wasn't even a group of people there focused on literacy. We had to restructure to make sure that we had a team of individuals thinking about how we could make sure that our kids in our state could actually read and build some strategy around that. So literacy, then the next thing is high schools. You know, we have funding in K-12 education to do many things. We just have to rethink the ways in which we are using that funding, particularly in our high schools, to make sure that we are being responsive to the needs of kids, families, and our communities. And so what does that mean for us? It means our very bold, ambitious plan called Fast Forward, which was recently featured nationally. And what that plan does is it allows high school leaders to work with community colleges, to work with four-year institutions, to work with individuals in the community who offer full apprenticeships or high-wage credentials, and to create new diploma pathways, so that instead of a traditional diploma pathway, that we can have more responsive, individualized diploma pathways based on the needs and interests of individual students. And so that might mean that instead of a junior going to their traditional high school every day, that junior might want to be ultimately an RN. And so we should have the opportunity to allow that junior to go to school if they so desire and their parents so desires at a hospital, for instance, every day, and get on-job training, on-job skills, maybe as a LPN, that ultimately leads to them becoming an RN, and it's all financed on the dollars that we already have available in K-12 without asking for additional dollars. And so those are just some of the ways in which we have to think about how are we preparing students for what's next in their life. If they graduate on May 15th, are they truly ready for something, whether it's service or a career or a continuation in college on May 16th? And sadly, the answer is often no. And so it doesn't mean that people aren't working hard. It doesn't mean that people aren't trying to do good work. It is the system that needs to be shifted, and the system that needs to be adjusted. And so that's what we are trying to do. We are also very committed to ensuring that families are in the driver's seat when selecting schools. We believe that families should have options to choose the school that makes the most sense for them. Now that could look a number of different ways. Overwhelmingly, that's going to look like your neighborhood school. That could look like a non-public school. That could look like a scholarship or a voucher opportunity to go to a different school. That could be an ESA. That could be homeschool. That could be a number of different options, but what we need to make sure that we are doing is making sure that parents are in the driver's seat of those decisions. And so recently, we created an Office of School Choice within our agency that is solely focused on trying to help put parents back in the driver's seat around high-quality options for their kid. Yeah. And then also, again, I'm just going to mention teaching is the profession of all other professions. I'm sorry, I'm a bit biased. I recently was on a college tour, and I apologize if you've heard me tell the story before, but I think it's pretty significant in the story that it tells. I was on a college tour with my son who just graduated from high school. 33 on the ACT, black belt in karate, captain of the football team, dad brag. So we were on a college tour. We're in an SEC school. 300 high school seniors are on the college tour. So the person's up front on the stage, they're doing their thing, they're trying to convince these 300 high school seniors to come to their school. And so they say, you know, raise your hand if you're here to enter the medical profession. When the hands go up. They say, raise your hand if you're here for our world famous business school. Hands go up. They say, raise your hand if you're here for our education program. Crickets. Not a single hand of 300 children is race. That is a problem. So what we have to do is we have to have conversations with teachers and better understand the situations for which they are living and they are experiencing that is preventing them from telling their kids, you should go be a teacher. Because teachers should be the biggest recruiter of other teachers, and sadly that's not happening today. And I have some ideas around why that's happening, but we're going to have a more focused strategy on truly understanding from teachers why that's happening in the very near future. But it doesn't just need to be about individuals coming up through high schools and going into colleges of education. We need to create pathways for individuals who are mid-career in other professions, who have expertise in some level of content that they can offer to the school system. And we need to look at seamless opportunities for those individuals and encouragement for those individuals to consider a career in education. You know, we're also in the 21st century. We should look at flexible options. We should look at remote work. We should look at individuals who want to be part-time teachers. We should look at every option that's available for us so that we can ensure that kids have access to the highest quality teacher that they could possibly have. So those are some of the initiatives and areas where we are spending the majority of our time working and thinking through ways to be better. Because it was mentioned, I do want to talk briefly just about the work that we have done on social studies. You should be proud, and I am again biased. The state of Louisiana has the greatest social studies standards in the United States. And that's not just me saying that. I think you'll find that, do a simple Google search, and I think you'll have other individuals that would affirm that for you. But my point is, that would not have happened without you and without other individuals like you across the great state of Louisiana participating in that civic process. And so where we started over a year ago versus where we landed, and we are landed today, is a very different place. And many of you in the room who follow it closely can attest to the fact that we are in a very different place. But again, it was because of the opportunities that we provided for public engagement, and it was because of your willingness to enter into the space and engage that we are at the place where we are today with those quality standards. And look, we don't shy away from anything in those standards. Look, we make sure that those standards are congruent, and that from the time a child enters kindergarten to the time they exit in 12th grade, they hear a coherent sequence of the American story and the Louisiana story that is not choppy and is congruent along that time frame. We incorporate historical voices from everyone. Everyone is part of the story. We have increased rigor because our kids need it and deserve it. We talk about literacy rates all the time. We talk about how too few of our kids can read and too few of our kids can do math at the levels where we desire them to be. But did you know that the lowest level of proficiency in the state of Louisiana among any content area is in social studies? I assume that it's easy for you to believe, but it's also true. Right now, about a quarter of our kids in the state of Louisiana are proficient in the area of social studies, history, civics, world geography, economics. Why? A number of reasons. One of those, we had weak standards. And everything begins with standards. You have a quality standard, it's a high standard and expectation. Then local school systems can develop and select curriculum, hire staff, train staff, etc. So we have that in place. The standards tell the whole story of our country. They don't apologize for the country. They talk about moments when we have to self-correct. And instead of using other ideologies that you may have seen in the media, we determined that we wanted to use a freedom framework. We wanted to look at every single standard and say, the quest in America has always been about freedom. Those individuals who place their sacred honor on the line to sign the Declaration of Independence, the abolishment of slavery, suffrage, civil rights. The American spirit in each one of us in here today believes in our freedom. And so instead of other ideologies, we wanted to approach the standards with a freedom framework of helping our kids appreciate that and understand that. And we wanted to focus on primary documents and primary speeches. We wanted the kids to read the Declaration of Independence. We wanted them to read the Constitution. We wanted them to understand the Gettysburg Address, the I Have a Dream speech. We wanted them to understand the primary documents that have been a part of our country. And so that's why in second and third grade now, as we move forward, it's the country is America, and it is the people, places, and papers that have made that country great. And so in second and third grade, that's what our kids are going to learn, and they'll have a very strong background as they move forward throughout their school experience. And so we're really proud around that work, but I wanted to take the opportunity with you all today to just say thank you for engaging, and I would say thank you for engaging in other audiences as well. But I know members in this room certainly participate in that process, and it is a stronger process because of, and it is a stronger product because of your participation. So just wanted to acknowledge that. And if it's appropriate, I'll take a few questions. Sure. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so she is asking a little bit about the structure of educational governance in the state of Louisiana. So is that fair? So statewide, the legislature certainly has oversight over all things. And then BESI exists, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, to create policies that govern education in the state of Louisiana. They have one employee, which is me, and I lead the Department of Education. So BESI exists, and the Department of Education exists, and BESI is a board of elected and appointed individuals who then appoint the state superintendent, which is me. I lead the Department of Education. We have roughly 191 local education agencies in the state. These are your traditional public school boards or public charters. Then, of course, we have homeschool options and non-public options as well. Roughly 1,700 schools across the state of Louisiana. Roughly 1,400 early care centers across the state. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, right. Yeah, so she's asking about materials for teachers for the standards. So next year is a learning year for the standards. So we are kicking off a learning year of the standards to spend a year teaching teachers about the standards. And so during that time, we'll also be trying to engage with publishers that might look to write curriculum on the standards. And then so ultimately local school systems such as yours here would make decisions on curriculum selection. But that is a process that doesn't happen overnight. That takes some time. But we are kicking off a learning year this summer for our teachers. The standards that are in place presently will be in place next year, and then the following year, the new standards will go into effect. Yep. You're welcome.
So as a current middle school teacher, the talk was around the school for teachers about how can we protect our students. A lot of our students come from broken homes and other factors that keep them away from learning. And upon hearing about the incident at a Slidell private school with corporal punishment and physical abuse, how can we as not only parents, advocates, and other people who are involved in children's lives have taken a more active and proactive approach to making sure our children are safe in class?
Yeah, no, it's a great question around student safety, and certainly that is the most important thing that we can do every single day is make sure our kids are safe. What I would encourage is, as a State Department of Education, we can set policy, we can set standards, but ultimately, as it should be, education is local. Education is a local affair, guided and directed by local individuals. So I actually wrote an op-ed around this about a year ago, encouraging everyone to be engaged within their local communities and having those conversations at the local level. I think if we look at some of the politics that have taken place across the country, we see that more and more people are starting to appreciate the value of parents being engaged in the process. And parents are not just going to sit back and let the system operate without their engagement anymore, and they should. But the answer to your question is, it's a local matter. I think local oversight matters, local engagement matters, and that case, not like any other that would involve personnel, should be reviewed locally. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever thought of putting cameras inside classrooms to be able to monitor truly what the teacher is teaching the children and the response to actions in the classroom?
Yeah, well, that's actually a pretty relevant question today. I don't think that we would do that as a state agency because, again, employees are employees of their local educational agency. So, for instance, in East Baton Rouge Parish, employees in classrooms are the responsibility of the East Baton Rouge Parish system if they're a member of the school system, traditional school system. But what we know that has happened most recently is there was legislation passed for cameras in self-contained special education classrooms, which, we didn't support the legislation because we can't support legislation, but we certainly support the idea of having those cameras available in special education classrooms. And so the challenge became finding a way to fund it. And thankfully, our legislature, Representative Hodges and others, I believe have allocated, I want to say $8 million to the program. So over the next couple of years, you will begin to see an introduction of cameras into our special education classrooms, which I think is really important because these are children oftentimes that have an exceptionality that might prevent them from being able to communicate what might be happening to them in the classroom. And again, overwhelmingly, not a problem, not a challenge, but we put practices like that in place to deter things from happening, but also so that we can be aware when they do happen. So there will be classes in special education classrooms. There will be cameras in special education classrooms across the state moving forward in the next couple of years. And I think the legislature, I really do, I thank the legislature for allocating those dollars because our office asked the federal government numerous times around numerous funding sources if we could use those sources to fund it, and we were repeatedly told no. So it's really great that the state legislature stepped up on this item. Ms. Karen.
I just wanted to share on that. There are some parishes in the state that do have cameras in the classroom, in case anybody wants to look further into that. Has the department considered taking a look at the influx of dollars into the growth of mental health services inside the educational system as opposed to, because it seems like it's certainly is limiting and dropping our mental health system outside of the educational system, at least in the legislature, where it could be access to these leaders.
Yeah.
I know that's a leading question.
No, I understand. I'll answer it this way because this is what I think about. So education in Louisiana received $4 billion with a B stimulus dollars in response to COVID. 90% of those dollars flowed directly to those school systems that we just mentioned. We're just a pass-through agency. But what we did is we created what we call Louisiana Comeback. And so you can go to louisianacomeback.com on a computer. At that site, you can find by school system. You can go click on a map, click on your parish, and you can find data around student performance, pre-pandemic, after a couple of years of pandemic. You can find an approved recovery and acceleration plan. We asked every system around the state to develop a plan of how they would use money to do three things. One, make sure kids were back in school and engaged. Chronic absenteeism and truancy, making sure they're well when they're there. Two, addressing learning loss and accelerating beyond that loss. And then 3, which is professional development that our teachers need and deserve, and how to handle many of the situations they're dealing with. And so those are the 3 buckets. And also we create a financial dashboard. So you can go in, LouisianaComeback.com, you select your parish, you can go to the financial dashboard, you can look at where they are spending those funds as a form of transparency. I think other states will probably try to mirror what we have done. But in that first bucket, which is attendance and well-being, one of the allowable expenses would be for schools to hire additional counselors, social workers, mental health professionals, individuals who can go out in the community and track down kids and families that are disengaged from the system to bring them back into the system. So in that particular budget, that's where we see a significant portion of that money being invested, particularly around that wellness component. Yes, ma'am. So it's a sensitive question because you're asking me on basically the day after. And I want to be very cautious to not sound political around this in any type of way. I'll speak from my experience as a former system leader. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did, you had your fire drills, you have your tornado drills, you have those things, but we wanted to do vulnerability checks. So we wanted to have trained individuals, usually they were law enforcement agents that were off duty, come and just walk the building, look at areas of vulnerability, make suggestions to us. And so we did that. And that informed training for kids and training for adults. But one of the most important things that I think schools can do is consider access control, single point of entry.
Yes.
I'm not certain about the situation that happened in Texas. I don't have all the details. I have reached out to our sister agency and the commissioner there to offer, on behalf of our state, prayers and sympathies, and we stand ready to assist any way possible. But something I read said that potentially the intruder came in from a back door. And so I don't know if that's true, but what I do know to be true is all those doors in the school need to be locked.
Yes.
There needs to be a single point of entry, one point of entry, and there needs to be a vestibule area where an individual, whether you're a mom or a bad guy, you can't go off into every single wing of the school.
Yes.
You need to have access control. And look, I don't want to get too far in the weeds in this, but ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to buy time to let the good guys get in. And so ultimately you want to have well-being taken care of so that you're spotting situations that of individuals who could be a threat. But in a situation like that, you're trying to buy time, and access control buys time. And so one of the things that we're going to certainly be doing with our school systems around the state is I don't know the level of public engagement. We're certainly going to be having private engagement with school systems around the state, asking them to consider practices and facilities to prevent, to the extent possible, something happening here like happening. And I'm a dad, and I drop a kid off at school every day, and it's sad, but I'll tell you the truth. I make sure I tell him I love him. I make sure I tell him, I'll tell you the truth, I tell him let people see Christ in you today. I say take care of people. And I don't just say that because I think it's good for him. I say that because I don't know what's going to happen. Me, him, and so I just always want to have those words. No, it's really not. Usually it's local education agencies working in collaboration with their law enforcement agencies to make sure that those things are in place. And I don't think that I should engage in the relationship between a local school system and their local sheriff. You know, those, we can encourage that, but those relationships need to be between those individuals. Yes, ma'am. One more question, I'm told.
I just wanted to share some feedback I got from parents.
Sure.
I was kind of startled by it because I don't think this way. I've gotten a lot of calls to statistics from very upset parents, and I was really struck by the level of fear that they are seeing. If there's a way for the department to encourage our local systems leaders to pause for a moment, to meet with their parents in some way, to just acknowledge those fears, I think that would be a tremendous way to engage with their families. I'm just stunned at the level of fear that our families are feeling across the state. I've spent some level of time.
No, that's good advice. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm told I have to sit down, so thank you all so much. I hope you, I hope you'll invite me back one day. Thank you.